context. It was a profound saying from Genesis 2. But what he was saying is it was really a shadow of the relationship of Christians and Christ, the church and Christ himself. Notice in verse 13 of Acts chapter 8, right? Even Simon believed and was baptized.
Simon Sorcerer is a really good example of this because it's very clear when you read Acts chapter 8 that Simon was saved. Nowhere does he say, I'm going to build my churches. Sometimes it's really hard, but you just can't quit. You got to keep going. And that's what Christianity is all about, is to keep going.
And the New Testament is that by which we will be judged. Now these were more noble than those in Thessalonica. They received the word of God with all eagerness, examining the scriptures daily to find out if these things were so. Join us as we look into the inspired text of King Jesus with the same desire and approach to discover the will of God with Berean spirits.
Okay, it's Thursday morning, 10 o'clock. Time for another episode of the Berean Spirits. Joining me today is Craig Benny of the Lake of the Ozarks Church of Christ, right in the heart of Missouri. How are you doing, Craig?
I'm doing great this morning, Rich. Thanks.
All right. Then Josh Thornhill from the Brookmead Church of Christ in Johnson City, Tennessee. How are you, Josh?
I'm doing pretty well, Craig. Richard, whatever your name is.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
This whole
No
time
problem.
I thought Chris was the blind one.
Chris is not with us now. I probably should open with that. Chris is not with us this morning. He is under the weather, and we're praying for him. He has an ailment that flares from time to time, and this is a pretty good flare up that he's having to deal with. So please keep Chris in your prayers. He's really struggling with this right now, and we'd appreciate it. Okay, today, the topic for today is the many faces of deception. And we're going to try to uncover some of those faces for you. Deception in the Bible is not a good thing, but yet we see man practicing it. Josh and I were talking before the show started about how man is just such a lying person. Or we are such a lying people. Maybe that should be it. But, and we have classified different lies. We've given them different names to mean different things. And we're going to talk about some of those today. They're really not found in the Bible, but what we see in the Bible is just truth and lies. And that's the way God looks at it. It's either honest or it's dishonest. But we don't, man doesn't do that. In John chapter 8, by way of opening, in verse 44, Jesus said this about the Jews. He says, "You are of your father, the devil. The lust of your father you will do. He was a murderer from the beginning and abode not in the truth, because there's no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a father. He is a liar and the father of it." So you can see he is the original liar. And we go back to the Garden of Eden. That's what he said to Eve when they talked about the forbidden fruit. She let him know that if they take of it, they would die. And he said, "You shall not surely die." So he was a liar even back in the beginning. And unfortunately, many men have chosen to follow that path. In Proverbs chapter 12, in verse 22, the Lord makes it very clear what he thinks about that when he says, "Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, and but they that deal truly are his delight." So we have to be very careful about speaking the truth. In Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 25, Paul gave instructions to the New Testament Christians when he says, "Wherefore, putting away lying, speak every man truth with his neighbor, for we are members one of another." So it's very clear that God deals with either truth or lies, and that's how we're going to be judged. We either are speakers of the truth, or we're liars. And if we're liars, then we're of the devil, because he was the father of it. He was the one who did it first. So we have to be careful, especially Christians, when we are supposed to be known for speaking the truth. See if I can bring up a passage here. It's something that I'm going to speak of tonight on Gospel Preaching Live. The title of tonight's lesson will be The Lips of a Priest. But I want you to notice in Malachi chapter 2 and verse 7, something that the Lord said through the prophet Malachi. It says, the lips of a priest should guard knowledge, and people should seek instruction from his mouth, for he is the messenger of the Lord of hosts. And so if people are to seek instruction from the priest's mouth, which, according to the New Testament, that's the Christian, if we're supposed to live our life in such a way as to bring people to the Lord and let them ask us for a reason about the hope that's within us, then what type of reputation do we need to have, guys? Well, Josh. All right, Craig, go ahead.
Well, we're told if we're going to speak, we need to speak as oracles of God, right? And so if we're the oracles of God, the mouthpieces of God, we should be representing God. And so with Hebrews chapter 6 tells us that it's impossible for God to lie. It should be, obviously it's not impossible for us to lie, but because we can choose to do that, and God, his nature won't let him lie because of his righteousness. We need to be trying to emulate the righteousness of God. And if we've changed our mind to be like God and to think like God, then we need to be putting away the things that are of this world, putting away the things that this world has corrupted. And speech is one of those things that this world has corrupted. And lying is one form of that corrupt speech. You mentioned the book of Ephesians, where they're told to speak the truth in love with one another. The next chapter, they're told to put away all lying. That's what you were talking about. This idea of putting away the perverse tongue. It's part of a perverse tongue. Jesus said, "Let your yes be yes and your no be no." Put away lying from you. You'd mentioned that we're talking about deceptiveness in the show today, and I'm like, well, this is going to be a short one. Don't lie. Tell the truth. I mean, this is there's a lot of repercussions for lying, but one of those things is it separates you from God. This is an unacceptable trait for the Christian.
Josh, is it always easy to speak the truth?
No. As the saying goes, sometimes truth hurts. There's times where I've had to sit down with a couple and I've had to tell them some hard things, and it's not easy. I mean, it'd be easy for me to just sit there and pat them on the back and say, you're okay, but they're not. And so sometimes saying what's true is not easy. Now, of course, you need to speak the truth in love, as it says in Ephesians chapter 4. But sometimes, saying what is true is not always going to be the pleasant or the easy or the fun thing to do. But we've got to speak what's true at all points. We have to be known as people of our word, and we have to be known as people of truth. And so we have to do what's right, regardless of how easy or difficult it may be.
So I being that there are situations where we're going to be tempted to lie, and that's, the first thing that came to my mind, I was thinking about Matthew 18, where if a brother sins against you, you go and tell him his fault alone. And that's always been one of the hardest things to me, is to confront something like that, is to tell, like Josh was saying, tell somebody about an error. It's so much easier, isn't it, and it's a temptation to find some way to lie about it, gloss it over, not to have to deal with responsibility. And too many times, we see that taking place, and that's where the devil is able to make gain, because he realizes, that we're being, that's going to be hard for us to abide by the truth. And but the Lord, the Lord didn't tell us it was going to be easy. Um, Far from it. So, needless to say, there are things that are hard for us to do, and because of that, man has invented different, or labeled, I should say, different types of lies. And I thought we'd go through some of them just to show that they're still wrong in the Bible. Remember, when we're going through some of these, um, anything that's a lie is wrong. Anything. Craig hit it right to the point. If you're not speaking truth, you're wrong. That's it. You either speak truth or you're wrong. So, with that said, and Craig's right, we could just end it right there. But I do want to, touch on some things just because of the way man likes to think and justify things. Because I'll be honest with you, there have been times in my life I've said a lie. I haven't always been honest. I have said lies in my life. I'm 58 years old. And I believe that just about every Christian, or along with any man who's not a Christian, has said a lie at some point or another. So this is a common temptation, and it is a common sin that we have all practiced. But it's really important that we uncover this so that we don't deceive ourselves. You can get to the point where you're so used to telling certain lies that you justify it. And then you can start thinking of it as a righteous thing instead of something that's unholy. And so let's go through some of these if you guys don't mind, and if you have any comments, be feel free to jump in. But this is some of the things that I came up with, and just to show you there's different types of lies, I want to bring up one as a way of starting. I don't know if you guys have any of you ever heard of a blue lie? Because this is interesting.
No.
Yeah, a blue lie compared to a white lie. A blue lie is a form of lying that is told purportedly to benefit a collective or in the name of a collective good. Now, the origin, they say, of this comes from cases where police officers made false statements to protect the police force or to ensure the success of a legal case against an accused. Now, again, I've never heard this. I'm just bringing this up to show you that there are so many different types of lies that we probably that I didn't know about a blue lie, and I found it interesting. But now here's an example though that I believe they would call a blue lie, and this is in Genesis 37 when Joseph was sold into slavery. His brothers put him in the pit, and he had his coat of many colors, but they put him out and sold him as a slave into Egypt. But they took his robe and they slaughtered a goat and dipped the robe in blood. And it goes on to say, and they sent the robe of many colors and brought it to their father and said, "This we have found. Please identify whether it's your son's robe or not." And he identified it and said, "It is my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him." And Joseph, without doubt, is torn into pieces. So it would appear that this deception that they pulled was able to benefit the collective good, being the brothers. It kept their themselves from having to face responsibility for what they did with their father. Again, I'm just bringing this up. This is just my interpretation of what a blue lie might be. But now, have you guys have any other biblical examples you can think of off the top of your head? If not, we'll go on to the next one.
I'm not sure if that this lie benefits the collective, or it's a well, you said collective good. I'm guessing you got that definition from someone else.
I found it on the internet.
Yeah. The thing is that the language there is a little misleading, and I know we have a few more to talk about, but the idea that we look at this and we think a lie is a good benefit or a benefit for good. Even if it seems like that lie could be a benefit for good and it's getting us out of a situation or whatever, that's not good. It's not good to brush under the rug anything. It's not good that the brothers of Joseph deceived their father so that they could get away with murder, or well, selling their brother into slavery, um, and could have turned into murder. But these things aren't good. And I think the language that we sometimes put on these, I'm sure we're going to talk about the little white lie. The language that we sometimes put on these is trying to give us peace of mind, but it's not. We could call it whatever we want, but it's a sin, is what it is.
That's exactly what it was. It was a lie. But I'm just using this to show it that
Absolutely.
somebody smart somewhere has labeled this as a blue lie. It doesn't mean it's right. It's just a lie, but it might be something that people in today's world might try to accomplish. Um, you know, I was thinking about truckers. They used to have to do their logs, and it was a written log. But in order for them to benefit the collective good, which was the trucking company, they were told to lie about their logs. So they couldn't company could not flourish. They didn't think without them fudging their logbooks. Now again, that's lying for the collective good. That might be labeled a blue lie, but if you start justifying that, if you start believing in that, excuse me, that's just dishonest. And so, don't we can't allow such things to go into the way we view things. Now, Craig brought up the white lie, and we'll go into that right now. The funny thing about a white lie, and I'll go ahead and give man's definition of it. A white lie is when someone tells another person a lie that is harmless, or so they think. This is typically done to protect someone's feelings. For example, telling your mom the dinner she cooked tastes great when it really doesn't. And of all the lies that I looked up, that is the one lie I couldn't find a biblical example of. It seems like lies are always based on selfishness. So I don't know. I mean, is it possible, Josh? Is there a way or an example in the Bible that that you can think of where someone told a white lie, or is it even possible to tell a lie that's not based in selfishness?
Well, first of all, I don't know of any example off the top of my head of a white lie, at least anyone that might fit that definition. But I agree that it is, in a lot of cases, it's based on selfishness. I think all sin is a result of selfishness. So any lie that we tell would then be a result of selfishness. But I think generally when we, the white lies that we might tell, I think a lot of times people mean well because they want to spare the feelings of others. They don't want to hurt their mother's feelings or hurt whoever's feelings. And so they'll say things like, "Oh, that dinner was great," when, it was awful. But still, I mean, that dishonesty is not helping anything. It might hurt their feelings if you say you didn't care for it, but I mean, we still have to be honest.
Well, there's ways of being tactful.
Sure.
There's different ways to describe something that doesn't taste good. You could say that it's interesting. Well, I don't know about I don't know about that. It may not be interesting to you, but we need to make sure that if we're forced to say something, make sure it's the truth. And you can always say, listen, that's the words I'm going to tell you might offend you, but it just really, for my taste buds, it didn't suit me. But at least they know you're being honest. And I know that's a difficult thing, but yeah, so that can be a hard thing to do.
It's hard to weigh in our minds the importance here, or the how do we balance being truthful with being loving. Sometimes it's not beneficial and it's not loving to speak. We can't speak lies, and we can't deceive, because that's what a lie is, deception. It's not, a lie isn't necessarily a spoken lie. It's just the intent to deceive. And so, we think about stuff like, your mom cooked dinner, your wife cooked dinner, and you don't want to be mean about it. You don't want to be, you don't want to hurt her feelings because you love her, and you don't want to cause her pain. I think if we have a relationship with our loved ones that we should, where they know that we're not hateful, we're not trying to be mean, we're not trying to be rude about this, or to tear them down. It's not my intent to be mean about something, but if you ask a question, I have to answer the question. And if I tell you your dinner didn't taste good, that's the example we're running with here. If I tell you dinner didn't taste good, I'm not saying that to be harsh. And I think that how we view our relationships, or how we treat our relationships long before that situation comes up, plays a part in that. It's hard to speak the truth when they're going to perceive you to be harsh. But if we have a good relationship with those that we love, and we really love one another, then they're going to know that it's not intended to be harsh. I'm not saying that they're not going to think it was harsh, or we're not going to say things in a wrong way sometimes. But when Paul told the church in Ephesus to speak the truth, he said, do it in love. And so that's the important part. We can speak the truth if it's coming from love.
Here's one that I'd like for Josh to comment on. It's called the lie of omission. And this is a deceptive tactic when someone tells another only the partial truth, leaving out the most crucial and pertinent information. Josh, you got a good example of that?
Yeah, I think Abraham is a good example of that. I believe it's Genesis 13 and Genesis 20, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, Genesis 13
Genesis
with Egypt, and Abimelech 20. Yeah.
Yes. So he goes down to, I guess he goes into another place, and he fears for his life because Sarah was beautiful, and he thought that they might kill him so that they could take her. And so he says, tell them you're my sister. Well, technically that was true, because she was his half sister. But the point there is, as Craig has already pointed out, what Abraham was doing was intending to deceive them, because he didn't want them to know that she was his wife. And so he said, she is my sister, intending to leave that part out so that they wouldn't kill him on account of her, which led to other problems, on his behalf. But I think there's a case where, we leave things out, and that's not to say you have to say every detail of every little thing at all points. But I think sometimes we leave things out with the intent of deceiving. And, another example of this, and to kind of make some application of that, I had talked to somebody a while back, and, we had become pretty close in our relationship. And after a while, she decided to, distance herself, which, if that's her choice, that's her choice, But, I noticed that things weren't quite the same. And so I just asked if there was something wrong. And, I just got the usual, I'm busy. I'm just busy. Work is so busy right now. I'm just busy, which I legitimately think she was busy, but she had made a conscious decision that she was going to distance herself from me. And so by saying I'm just busy, she's being dishonest, because she has made another choice, and she's using her busyness as a scapegoat to get out of the reality of the situation. And that just made things worse. So, if we decide something, or in Abraham's case, we need to be forthright with what it is what the reality of a situation is. If we've chosen to distance ourselves from somebody, or whatever it may be, we need to be open about it. And of course, again, we need to be kind in the way that we speak to others. But Uh, we just need to be open and forthright and not deceptive in what we say. And one thing that I've appreciated in Psalm 15, Psalm 15, verse 1, it begins with, who may abide in your tabernacle, who may dwell in your holy hill. Basically, the question is, who can abide with God, or who can dwell with God? And in verse 2, it begins with the one who walks uprightly. And I think that kind of is a summary. The one who walks uprightly can dwell with God. And then he kind of defines uprightness, or what walking uprightly means. But the end of verse 2, it says he speaks the truth in his heart. And I think the things that we've discussed already, whether it's the white lie, the blue lie, or this sin of omission, or the lie of omission, like Abraham and these other examples that we've used, they're not speaking the truth in their heart. They're not speaking truthfulness in what it is that they say. And so they need to, we just have to be honest. And sometimes, again, it's uncomfortable. And I realize, especially in the case of that young lady, I think she wanted to spare, those conversations can be uncomfortable, and you might want to spare the feelings of others, but you still have to be honest. And we can't be deceitful in what we say or do.
It's interesting you bringing up speaking the truth in your heart, because there is someone who did lie, and their lie was something that was not said out loud. But I want to hit that to the next point. The next lie I want to talk about is the bold, bare, or bald-faced lies. And those are just blatant lies. But bold or bald and bare means it's an uncovering. It's an old expression, where there's no hair on your face, people can see clearly who you are. But it's a lie that's obvious. And a good example is a young boy with chocolate all over the outside of his mouth when he's denying taking a piece of chocolate cake. That is that's a bold lie. That's a blatant lie. But one example I want to give, and this goes to what Josh was saying about what's in our heart. And I'll read this starting in verse 9 of Genesis 18, when the Lord, along with those two angels, had come to Abraham, and the two went on to visit Lot in Sodom. But he said, where is Sarah, your wife? And he said, she is in the tent. And the Lord said, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, shall have a son. And Sarah was listening at the tent door behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old and advanced in years. The way of women had ceased to be with Sarah. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, after I am worn out and my Lord is old, shall I have pleasure? And the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and say, shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time, I will return to you about this time next year, and Sarah shall have a son. But Sarah denied it, saying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. And he said, no, but you did laugh. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is it's a good example of a blatant lie. But it was something, as Josh mentioned, she said in her heart. She didn't say it out loud, but the Lord heard her, and he accused her. He said, no, you did say this. You did laugh. You just laughed within yourself, but you did laugh. And so she denied it. And it was something that took place inside of her. And I guess maybe the lie was not inside of her per se, but the very act of what she did was inside of her. And so I'm just using that to say that God judges us, not just by what takes place on the outside, but also what takes place on the inside. We have to, as Josh said, we have to be very careful that we guard our hearts and our thoughts, because it can, if we start denying what's within us, then, as Josh says, where's the truth? We have to be honest with ourselves. When we look into that spiritual mirror, which is the Bible, we have to be honest with how we look. And if we can't do that, then what's going to happen to us on the day of judgment? you know, we're going to find ourselves losing our souls. Why? Because there's no truth within us. So we're going to have to want to be honest within ourselves. Another good example of that was Aaron. If you remember in Exodus 32, and this has always been one of my favorite lies, if there is such a thing, but it, it is so, it's just kind of funny.
There's a quote for the intro.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite lies.
Well, it is on the biblical lies. It goes to show you how far a man will go. And Aaron, he goes pretty far here. But when Moses went up to get the 10 commandments, of course, you remember how the people rebelled, and they decided they were going to build this golden calf. And in Exodus 32, 3 and 4, it says, all the people broke off golden earrings, which were in their ears, and brought them unto Aaron. And he received them at their hand and fashioned it with a graving tool. And after he made it a molten calf, they said, these be our gods, O Israel, which brought us up out of the land of Egypt. Okay, well, after that, we're not going to read it. Moses comes down, and of course, what's going on? I'm just paraphrasing. And Aaron's caught in verse 24. He says, and he goes, I said to them, these are Aaron's words. He said to the Israelites, whosoever hath any gold, let them break it off. So they gave it to me, and I cast it into the fire, and there came out this calf. It's like, wow. He just threw it into the fire, and out come this calf. So again, that's a blatant lie. And I would call it a blatant lie, but it just goes to show you that, Aaron wasn't a bad person back then, but he got caught doing something he shouldn't have done. And he was tempted. And what did he choose to do? I mean, lies can be ridiculous. I mean, they can really make you look silly. But here's the deal, Craig, if we get caught in a blatant lie, what does the Bible say about the salt? If the salt has no power, then what's it good for? It's to be taken out and trampled on by men, right? And so if we're telling lies, who's going to come to us expecting to hear the truth? You mentioned earlier how truth can be, unpleasant to say. But if you're known for this, if you establish with other people the reputation that you're going to tell the truth no matter what, when they want to hear the truth, who are they going to come to?
Yeah, well, they're definitely not going to go to somebody who lies repeatedly. I think we all have met that person or know that person, maybe a member of the family or something that it seems like everything they say is a verifiable lie. I have a member of our family who lies pretty constantly, and it's you can't trust literally anything he says. It doesn't matter if he said I stopped at McDonald's for dinner. It's like, okay, he might have stopped at McDonald's for dinner, but maybe he didn't. But if you're the person who doesn't lie, if you're the person who always tells the truth, whether it's painful or not, then you get a reputation for that. The same way you get a reputation if you are the person who says a lie, whether it's an important situation or not, or whether the lie in your mind needed to be said. You just say lies. You have no credibility, and so the credibility is gone. And where are they going to go? We're supposed to be. You mentioned we're supposed to be the salt of the earth. Same passage. This is Matthew chapter 5. Salt of the earth, or the light to the world. We're supposed to be lights on the hillside, on the hilltop. People aren't going to look to us as a light if we don't shed light on the truth, if we don't illuminate the world rather than cast it in more darkness. And that's what lying is. That's you casting more darkness in the world, more lies, more false statements. That now there are some people who are looking for that. And if you're the person who will say whatever it takes to make people feel good, well, there's verses to talk about that too. 2 Timothy chapter 4 comes to verses or they'll heap up for themselves teachers based on their itching ears. Jeremiah chapter 5, I think it's the last verse of chapter 5, 30 or 31, that says, my prophets prophesy falsely, and the rulers rule by their own accord or their own power, and my people love to have it so. There are people who want to be lied to, so they're more comfortable. We need to make sure that we're not the ones that they're comfortable going to when they're looking for a lie. Because in the end, what do you have? In the end of a lie is destruction. I'd rather be true, be right, and have the truth and be saved than feel good for 80 years here on earth and then spend the whole of eternity burning in hell. Be the person who people are uncomfortable asking the truth from, because they know they're going to get the truth when they don't want to hear it.
Friends, if you have any questions or comments, I put the email address up at the bottom of the screen. Write to us at bereanspirits@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. And if you want to learn more about the fellow Bereans that make up Berean Spirits, you can check us out on the web at www.bereanspirits.com. That's www.bereanspirits.com. Again, we'd love to hear from you. So please make comments or send us an email and share this video with others. We are doing this to try to invite people and show people the benefits of Bible study. And we're trying to study our Bibles as the Bereans did in Acts chapter 17. That is our goal. And so with that said, guys, we're going to cover one more. I got more to go through, but I do think I'm going to work these up as a lesson because I think it'd be beneficial. But there's one more I want to get to. And if there's anything you guys want to address, you can do that with your closing remarks. But exaggeration. People like to exaggerate. And the definition of that is when someone exaggerates, it's usually based on some truth. However, the truth is built up with lies to make the information or story seem outrageous and or ridiculous. And that usually benefits them for whatever reason. Now, in Numbers chapter 13, after Joshua and Caleb came back with the other 10 spies, and they had gone into the promised land to spy out the land, and they came back with their report. And of course, Joshua and Caleb were like, hey, let's go. It's a land flowing with milk and honey. Let's go. But the other 10 spies, they weren't too crazy about the idea. But I want you to notice how far they exaggerated to try to make sure that everyone followed them. And it had dire consequences. I'll start reading verse 30. It says, Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let's go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it. Speaking of the promised land. And then the men who'd gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we are. So they brought to the people of Israel a bad report of the land that they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people that we saw in it are of great height. And there we saw, if I pronounce this right, Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come from Nephilim, and we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers. And so we seemed to them. So that is exactly an exaggeration. And it's far from the truth. We know that because if we read in the book of Joshua, what did the Israelites do? When they finally went into the promised land, they were able to conquer it, right? And so we know that they were exaggerating. And because the people listened to the exaggeration, they lacked faith. They listened to them. They didn't want to pay heed to Joshua and Caleb and go and obey God by going into the promised land. And then when they found out that they were not pleasing to God, they decided they were going to go in, even though Moses had told them, don't do it. The Lord's not going to be with you. And of course, that turned out bad for them as well. And they ended up having to wander in the wilderness until they all died. Everybody 20 years old and upward had passed away, except for Joshua and Caleb. So it cost them all, listening to this exaggeration, it cost them all an opportunity to go in and dwell in the promised land. Which, I mean, listen, Josh, I mean, the promised land, isn't that a comparison for the Christian today about going to heaven? What can exaggeration do to those who are seeking heaven? It can cause us to be misled. It can cause us to lack faith. And so exaggeration is not a good thing, is it?
No. We often hear this, like somebody goes fishing, and every time they tell the story, the fish gets bigger and bigger and bigger. We might look at that as something that's innocent, but if we're being dishonest, we're being dishonest. And I heard a lesson a few years ago about a preacher who was telling in the lesson about his father-in-law, what he witnessed his father-in-law as he was about to pass away from cancer. And he said he made he wanted to call his buddy to tell him about times he had fudged his golf score.
Oh, no.
And the point is, he realized that he hadn't been honest in those cases, and he wanted to make it right. So honesty is important. And I just want to make one quick other point here. There's a lot of things that are going around on social media, whether it's about such and such politician, this, that, or the other. There's a lot of things that we can share easily on our social media, but not everything we see is true. And before we hit that share button, we have a responsibility to verify that what we are sharing is truth, or else we are propagating a lie. And so we are being dishonest if we share something that is not true. And we bear the same consequences of speaking a lie when we share things on our profiles that are not true.
You mean not everything on Facebook is true?
Go figure.
Wow.
There's actually websites that present satire material. So they, as a joke, they make things that are not true. So,
yeah.
To be clear, we're on Facebook. That we're not talking about us. Everything we say is true.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not talking about us. Share us as much as you want.
But now this is a good point, though, because the Bereans, when Paul preached to them, what did they do with the words of an inspired apostle? Did they not verify that what he said was true?
No.
So this is called Berean spirits for a reason. Don't believe us. Verify what we're saying with what the Bible teaches. And we try to do that, with others as well. But that's just a good practice. So always compare things with what the Bible teaches. Well, friends, thank you for tuning in today. Again, we talked about the many faces of deception. I do think I'm going to put up a lesson on this. There's more I can mention about it, but be careful about telling the truth, because it's so easy to believe your own lies. It's so easy to exaggerate. It's so easy to. One thing we didn't talk about was minimalizing something. We need to just be honest and start practicing that to the best of our ability. Don't allow yourself to fall into the trap that it's okay to tell white lies or little lies or any kind of these classifications of lies that man comes up with. Remember, God says it's either truth or it's a lie. And if it's lie, it's a sin.
Hey.
Josh, you got any closing remarks?
I determined a while back, I just want to be known as a man of my word. If I say something, I want it to be trusted that it is true. And I think that's the way that God expects us to be as Christians. We need to be people of our word. And so let's try to be honest in all that we say and do.
Amen to that. Craig, you got anything?
Yeah, I'm going to take a moment to mention one of the comments in our comment section today.
Sure.
Little username Little King D. I'm not sure who that is, but he comments a lot most weeks he's on there talking to us. And today he brought up 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 11, where we're told that God will send them strong delusions that they might believe a lie. Now that's a whole that verse is worth its own lesson to talk about it. But the other part of that is that they might be damned who believe not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. And so I believe that context bears out that it's talking about basically it's saying if God will allow you to be deceived, he will allow you to hold your delusions and allow people to deceive you if you want to be deceived. If you don't have a love for the truth and you have a love for unrighteousness and you want to be tricked, God will allow you to be tricked. God is not forcing anyone to do his will. We'll have to bear the consequences of that, but he is not forcing us to do his will. God will let you be tricked. It is up to you to have a love for the truth. If you have a love for the truth, we're told that all we have to do is ask and it will be answered. Knock and the door will be open. We just have to look at it. Several times Jesus used the phrase, "He who has ears to hear, let them hear." If we have ears for the truth and we have ears to hear, and where our ears are open to hear the truth, we will find the truth and we'll be able to spot a lie because God has pointed out the lies. But God will let you be deceived if you don't have a love for the truth. I want to thank Little King D for making comments. Appreciate that.
Thank you. All right, guys, that's all we have for you today. Chris, if you're listening, we're praying for you. I hope you get better and you're joining us next week. Craig's going to play us out. But before that, I want to encourage you all to remember this is the day the Lord has made. Let's rejoice in it and be glad.
Thank you for watching Berean Spirits.